Yeah, welcome, Kevin. It's
Thank
a
you.
real pleasure having you here. To everybody who doesn't know Kevin or isn't aware of his work, Kevin is an amazing artist um, in many formats, particularly known for the digital realm, and he's done a lot of work in visual effects, worked on some amazing movies, and has been a visual effects artist and visual effects supervisor for many years, working on some incredible movies that you'll all know of. Things like Beautiful Mind and What Dreams May Come, where he won an Academy Award for his work on that. And yeah, there's many more things to say about you, Kevin. I know that lately you've been really interested in VR and making some incredible artwork in there, which I'm a huge fan of. So, yeah, that said, welcome today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Awesome. So, yeah, to start this off, I guess I'd love to hear about kind of the beginning of the journey for you a little bit, and kind of what got you interested into uh, digital visual effects, digital graphics, and what kind of got you into that? I know that you're an artist, a true artist, and you come from that world. But how you kind of transitioned into the digital world?
Well, it's a long story, but my my folks were artists in the film industry. They worked for Disney. My dad was a background painter and a story man and stuff, and my mother was one of the pioneers of ink and paint, and also the original model for Tinkerbell. So I am the son
Right.
of Tinkerbell, and so I grew up around art, and art kind of in a technological context of like filmmaking and animation and stop motion and all of these ideas of making art with technology. And so it was always my dream, even as a very small child, to be able to take that further somehow. And you know, I loved the rides at Disneyland where you had the projection around you 360 degrees and those ideas. And so and that's how it was for me in my imagination. You know, I was actually there. I wasn't looking at a picture of my imagination. I was immersed in it. So I think virtual reality was an idea that was deeply in my mind long before anyone had coined the phrase or had come up with the technology. I got into, I did traditional art. I went to art school. I worked in the film industry for many years doing traditional art, animation, stop motion, scenic painting, concept art, matte paintings, miniatures, all making props, sculpting, whatever was needed. The kind of the journeyman artist in the thing, I'd work on whatever they needed to be done. And I got into computers in the 80s for doing music. I also play music, and we had a band in the 80s, and I was real interested in synthesizers and so on. So I wanted to experiment with sequencing and using computers for that process. And so, but then it was like, well, you could do some crude graphics on it. I got an Atari, and then later an Amiga, and I started exploring computer graphics, and I was just all in. It was like, oh man, this is what I want to do. It's not very good yet, but it's getting better. And they already had better stuff. It was just those computers cost lots of money and
Yeah.
so on. So, but it was there, and I just kept working on it, and then I kind of noticed. I was like, hey, I could do some of the work I'm doing in visual effects with my computer. And it occurred to me like, wow, this would be perfect for doing visual effects. And this was before visual effects was using digital work really. There'd been a few things, there'd been the last Starfighter and whatnot was around that
Right.
time. But I was just kind of in the right place at the right time. I had traditional visual effects experience and connections, and had been doing computer graphics as well. And so I was able to help kind of introduce and pioneer the use of computer graphics in visual effects. And it was really just I kind of paddled a little bit and caught a wave, and it made for a wonderful career. And so I kept doing it. I kept thinking, I kept making my art, digital art on the side, fine art, abstract art, and whatnot. Um, and I was rather obstinate about it. Even when we would have 14-hour days, I would stay up that much later to work on my own renders and whatnot. And then, around 2010 or so, it seemed like the people were starting to talk about the VR thing again. And by 2014, I had a prototype headset I was making stuff for. So, yeah, it was like, well, I've waited for this for 30 years, so I'm doing this now.
Right. Finally, the world caught up with your idea.
Yeah, and there is actually a little seed story to the thing. Excuse me, which is when I was 4 years old, we moved to a little house in West Los Angeles, and there were three agave plants in the backyard. These big, kind of spiky, giant blue leaved things. And I'd never seen anything like them, and they just looked like aliens to me. And I would just sit and stare at them and imagine all manner of things. And so I imagined that they were speaking to me telepathically, and they had these kind of gruff voices, and they told me that they were the ancient elders from the distant future, and then they transported me to just incredible visions of other worlds and other futures, and just like this crazy journey, which and they talked to me and told me all kinds of things, much of which I had no idea what they were talking about. But they said that they were basically recruiting me to help them so that I would help to create their ancestors. That one day I would help to create their ancestors, and they were reaching back through time to recruit me to ensure their own existence. And so that's my story.
That was when you were four. 4 years
That's
old.
when I was four, yes. But the big thing about it was that it really gave me this idea of, what if you could transport people into an immersive experience somehow? Because clearly that's what I was experiencing in my imagination with these creatures. And whether it's imagination or I really was transported is undetermined at this time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of hard to prove kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
but lots to the world that's a mystery still that we can't explain. So
Yes. Well, I have a thing. They seem to think I have a thing called hyperphantasia. I had never heard of it till just a few years ago, but it's apparently, some people who are aphantasic don't have a mind's eye. They can't picture things in their mind, whereas people with hyperphantasia have a very vivid mind's eye and can imagine things very vividly. So anyway, I think that might contribute to my visions and vivid imagination.
right, that explains a lot. Yeah, well, that's really interesting. Thinking about my own journey into it, I was kind of coming from the more technical side of things, but there was a moment for me the same, and it was actually watching Jurassic Park, which I'm sure it is for lots of visual effects artists. But that moment for me made me realize what it was that I wanted to do, and lots of moments before that. But I think it's really interesting for some of the people that might be watching this or listening, just to hear about your journey into it and how you. Okay, sure. Yeah, just to hear like how you got into graphics, what you were inspired by, and what your journey was like on the way. Because I know a lot of people are already in the industry, already exploring it, but many aren't, and many are kind of thinking about how to go about that process and how what they might be able to do to explore it. And I think even for some of the people that are in the industry, trying, especially after a while of making art for other people, trying to keep that kind of spirit alive, I think is really, really important. So yeah, it's really interesting to hear you talking about you're doing your own work always and prioritizing that, even with the intense demands of productions.
Yeah, I think for me it was a kind of a coping mechanism and a survival thing in that I think when you have a creative spirit, whatever, like you kind of got to do it. It keeps you sane. Without it, I think I just seem to not do well. I would start to become unhappy. So I just found it was just better for me, even if it was just a few hours or an hour at night. If I just had my own thing to keep working on, it kept me going. Because it is, as an artist, if an artist means a lot of different things. But for me in this context, I kind of mean the kind of person who has a personal vision of making art, a personal art, an art practice. And I certainly, am grateful to have had such a wonderful career doing commercial art for visual effects, and I enjoyed it a great deal. And I was very fortunate to be able to actually kind of have both things inform each other. So, I'd be working on my own things at home, and then a visual effects challenge would come up, and I'd go, hey, I can apply this to the visual effects. Likewise, in doing visual effects, I'd come up with things to solve a visual effects problem. They like, wow, I can use that in my art and make something cool with that. And there's like lots of examples of that in my work. The opening of the Grinch That Stole Christmas. So you fly into a snowflake and you see these crazy crystalline caverns and mountains and so on. And that was some of the real early stuff I was doing with ISO surfaces and ISO functions. And I just kind of ported it over. I was like, okay, well, let me see if I can shoehorn my work into this movie I'm working on. And it worked. It got in the thing.
You got away with it.
I got away with it. It was really cool too, because I pitched the whole concept for the opening sequence, and they went, "Wow, that sounds great. Yeah, do that." So that was a kind of a way to get, and it was also cool because it was an idea that I had gotten from a Dr. Seuss thing, a different Dr. Seuss book, but and Horton Hears a Who or whatever. It was like they live on a speck of dust or something, and I thought, what if the whole thing was inside a snowflake? And anyway, it was a fun opportunity. And just there have been other cases where similar things. I was really into L systems and artificial life, and so when it came time to do the tree for What Dreams May Come, I was able to go, hey, what if we grew the tree instead of hand modeling it? And so it was like that became the first use of artificial life or L systems in a movie. And then I just then ported that over and did the same thing for the opening of Fight Club. The fly through in the human brain was also that was all grown. It was grown using artificial life rather than being hand modeled.
Wow, that's amazing. And were you responsible for helping to come up with some of the technology, as well as I'm sure it was a combination of lots of techniques?
Yes. For both of those, initially, I had the luxury of being on the project for quite some time by myself. So I kind of developed and prototyped a lot of the stuff and worked out some things in advance. And then when it came time to do it in production and did high res and everything, then I had, of course, the benefit of a team of brilliant artists and technicians.
Amazing to have that opportunity to have time to do research. I know often that's something that you don't get the luxury of having, and you have to get into it.
Yeah, it was kind of an amazing thing because I literally on Fight Club, I got to do brain research for like a year.
Wow.
And I was just like doing research and stuff, and and coming up with concepts and things. And um, David Fincher, the director, was really bent on it being anatomically correct and really realistic and so on. And that really hadn't been done at the time. So I got involved with all these different neuroscientists, and it was really fun. And as I was reading through the stuff and everything, I was into it for more than just the project. It was really, I was trying to, like, how can I use this? How can I develop intelligent artificial life? And it was really great to be learning not just about computational neuroscience, but about biological neuroscience. Provided a really great insights and perspective into being able to kind of, engineer artificial life and intelligence. And it was a weird coincidence. Um, the publicity guy at Digital Domain, Bob Hoffman, connected me to this incredible opportunity to be the keynote speaker at the inauguration of the International Brain Mapping Project.
Wow.
It was, many years ago, back in the 90s, and they were just beginning this International Brain Mapping Project, and it coincided with the annual, International Neuroscience Conference, and I was going to be the keynote speaker, and which was kind of inappropriate in a way, but that was the idea behind it. The guy who was running it, Dr. John Mazziota, he thought it'd be cool. He liked to have keynote speakers who weren't neuroscientists or who were from another field that would provide something, different or unique. And because I was working on Fight Club at the time, it had this kind of tie-in, but mainly they were interested in computer graphics and what was coming down the pike, the technology we were developing for movies that they would, soon be getting for visualization in science. And so I was able to show some of the early renders of Fight Club and talk about the brain and how I grew it. And then I couldn't help it. I had the top neuroscientists in the world there as a captive audience. And I had somehow arrogantly decided that I had made discovered some ideas, some concepts that I hadn't seen in any of the literature I'd been reading, any of the textbooks and stuff. And so I kind of blew through the visual effects talk and then presented my theories on neuropathology and development. And it changed my life. It was a really cool thing. There were certainly a few people rolling their eyes and, a little bit, I don't know, God, the nerve of this guy. But it was, mostly really well received and I think had an impact in general to the neuroscience community. I had some different perspectives on that. So ever since then, I've been very engaged and involved with the neuroscience community.
Wow. And it stemmed from that. That's the movie that encouraged you to go off on that journey.
Yeah, and I like I said, I'd been into artificial life and neural networks and everything before that, but that one really gave me an opportunity to focus on it and provided me with all this insight because I was kind of forced to shift my focus from computational neural networks to biological ones. And learned like, wait, there's a lot we can learn here.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I can imagine that being kind of exciting and nerve-wracking to do that talk, pun intended.
Yes.
But amazing, where that kind of courage, that moment of courage took you, and having the curiosity and the courage to push into that. It seemed like it opened so many doors for you.
Yeah, it was really great. I admit I was quite naive and arrogant to do that, but
we have to be a bit.
Yeah, I suppose so. I really had no idea what was going on, but it was really fun. I made a lot of good lifelong friends at that conference, and because of that talk. So they later they invited me back to speak after that again a couple times, and at one of them, they presented me with an honorary neuroscience thing with a hologram plaque and everything. So I'm an honorary
Wow.
neuroscientist now
Wow. How cool.
from the UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine. So it's
It's legit.
yeah. Well,
Wow.
it is honorary. I'm not permitted to perform any kind of surgery. They made that very clear. They wanted to make sure I knew that this did not make me an actual medical doctor.
Right.
Make sure
Yeah,
I understood the difference between neuroscientist and neurologist. They're very different things.
right. That's really, really amazing. I think for me, computer graphics has been an incredible thing in itself, but also something in in a similar way to that because of all the things that you have to replicate, you end up having to understand them a lot to be able to replicate them,
Yeah.
and it's an incredible career in that way, I think.
Isn't it true? Like I have learned about so many things that I never would have learned about if it weren't for some assignment in visual effects
Right.
and so many interesting things. And it's just broadened my perspective as an artist in so many ways. The neuroscience thing and just physics itself, like just really understanding physics, the physics of light, like, to the degree that you need to do computer graphics. Man, that makes you a great painter, like, or whatever. It's like to know those things is really useful in life, and
Yeah.
also in any art practice.
Yeah, and it's amazing how those two things can kind of draw together in moments and become the same thing. I feel lucky in myself to have had moments like that too, and those are some of my favorite times where your life and your work don't feel like two different things.
Yeah. Well, also the community itself, um, to be just steeped in an environment that is filled with the smartest, most brilliant people, programmers and artists and just really brilliant, freakishly talented people, is the greatest form of education you can get. It just I learned so much beyond my normal means, I think, by being exposed to really, really smart people and just having them at my fingertips. Well, how does this work? And well, why is that? And, like you work on a movie like Apollo 13 and, you're working with NASA people and stuff. And it's like you can ask all the questions and they're so kind and patient. And pretty soon you know all kinds of stuff about space. And, likewise, I had an incredible opportunity a few years back, I think 2011, CERN, the big, particle accelerator
Yeah.
in Europe. They invited me and my son to come out and consult because they had all these amazing discoveries and they had not done real well with their attempts at visualization. And so they wanted to know, how can we visualize things? And it was just like the most amazing, intense crash course in particle physics. And it was so much fun. And as it happened, like we happened to be there when they discovered the Higgs boson. Like we were
Wow.
there. Like I was in a meeting with the top, physicists at CERN, and one guy was late, and he came in and was like, "We got it!" Like,
Wow.
and yeah, it was wild. And within like 24 hours, the place was just a huge media circus. All the scientists in
I
the
bet.
world came there, and it was like it transformed our rather sort of placid, visit into this just exciting frenzy of activity. And it was the most fun. It was incredible.
Wow, that's so cool. Actually, Jackie has a little history with CERN too. She's been there. Her dad um, worked there for was it 2 years? A year. Yeah, he got posted over. He was working in the Los Alamos National Laboratory
Oh, uh-huh. Oh,
as a
wow.
physicist, particle physicist, and got posted out there for a year to go and help them out for a bit. I think they had
Oh,
a kind of daddy daughter day or something, and she got to go check it out.
oh, how cool.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. So did the the I guess the exploration of understanding the brain and understanding learning and how brains learn and how the computers can learn. How has that affected your own personal work?
Well, for me, the big thing from the beginning, I think I've thought about it a lot, because you have to be able to, people want you to be able to talk about your work. It's like, why do you make your work? And for a long time, it's like, I don't know. I have to. I don't know why. But in analyzing it, I really it came down to one phenomenon, which is that I grew up loving art and loving, all kinds of art, from cartoons and comic books to, Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci and Picasso. I just loved art. My parents loved art and taught me to love art. And I loved how it could make me feel. And I just loved the experience of awe, of just like, oh my God, look at that. And also with nature. I love nature. My folks had a little boat, and we'd go out into the sea and see just incredible sights and snorkel and everything. And it's just like, oh my God, look at that. Look, how can that be? And I just was fascinated with that experience. So all my life, I've been interested in, what is that? What's happening when I feel that way? And what is it that makes other people feel that way? And so my interest in neuroscience really kind of began with that, of, even before I was interested in neural networks or artificial intelligence, even in the very early days of visual effects, I was interested in, how does the brain process information? What order is it processed in? What's the most important elements? And, what are the priorities in terms of how we process it? And what makes it affect us emotionally, and what makes it move us and inspire that incredible emotion of awe? And so I think that's where I come from with my work. I'm always just striving to, be able to communicate and share that experience of awe with other people, be able to have them put on my headset and go into my world and meet my creatures and just be completely engaged to such an extent that the world goes away, the human condition is gone, and they're forced to basically accommodate a new model of reality. And that's really the most powerful thing about awe, which is a whole science now. It's like a whole field in and of itself, the science of awe. But one of the big things it does is that it inspires this process of accommodation, whereby we take in some information that generates awe, which basically means this experience is beyond my model of reality. This exceeds my understanding of things. And so you're forced to kind of go, okay, well, I have to recalibrate. I have to rebuild my model with incorporating this new information. And that's, a big part of the beauty of it, is that it can actually change people. It can actually move them to improve and grow and learn. And so I just love that about it. I think for a long time, I just wanted to make things that, look cool and we're bitching. But then you find out, wow, that's actually really good for you. It's great, brings about psychological well-being. It's even physically really healthy and therapeutic. We generate, in a state of awe, we generate anti-inflammatories, and, just like all these chemical processes happen in our brains and our bodies when we experience awe through art and nature.
Right. That's fantastic way of seeing it, and it's really, really interesting to hear you talking about it in that way, and how that's informed your own art and what you want to explore and express. And I love your personal work. I think it's really fascinating. I think one of the first times I saw it was when we were I was at a SIGGRAPH, and we met briefly at that time. Your art was used a lot in the promotional material that year. It was on lots of the screens, and on lots of things in
Right.
the auditorium. And I remember seeing it, thinking, wow, I've never seen anything like that, and I wanted to see more of it. So it's very cool to be talking with you now about where that comes from, and to be able to hear the kind of reasoning behind it. It's not necessary to have it to be able to enjoy it. I got that impression from it. It definitely made me feel that. It made me feel awe, and no, it didn't need that little placard next to it explaining what I was supposed to be feeling.
Right,
So
right.
well done. You definitely achieved your goal. How do you go about? I know that a lot of your expression is with abstract forms that become creatures, and do you have kind of like, I'm wondering kind of how much design versus happy accident versus things that come from algorithms, like or whether it's just how you approach kind of a new piece.
Yes. I really like, I came up with a phrase to describe it. I call it the hybridization of means. And so, for a long time, I would experiment with something, and I experimented with fractals, and I experimented with generative works and algorithmically produced things. And there was this amazing elegance to it I loved, or even just pure mathematical topology and stuff. You can make some just incredible things. But I always found it tends to make you want to approach it in a kind of a pure way. Like, this is purely generative. This is purely algorithmic, purely mathematical. This is just a fractal. But I found that to be very limiting. And the part of the thing, you could make incredible things, but they never had, you could never distinguish it as being mine. And whether it's ego or whatever else, for me, an important aspect of art is just self-expression, of having a unique style or a thing it's uniquely yours. And so I was always trying to figure out, how can I, utilize these incredible powers and possibilities that technology affords us, and yet still try to construct a kind of a look and a style that reflects my individuality, or just is uniquely mine. And so what I found was, by not being pure about it, by being able to just go, okay, here's an interesting algorithm thing. It created this thing, and I like parts of it, but I don't like this part. And then I can, go process it through a different thing, or just, turn it into a VDB and, manually sculpt parts of it. Or, like, I really like that approach of being able to work as procedurally or as manually as necessary. And that you can kind of just, throw some random numbers out there and see what you get, and then go through a bunch of those, find something you find interesting, and then go in and start tweaking the algorithm or the procedure a little bit to make it a little more what you want. And then down to, I'm going to go in there and just drag these points over because I don't like them where they are. And
Right.
and then so I think that hybridization is a real important part of my work. It's kind of where I've settled. I've tried all these different things, but I've done a lot of work where, computer graphics is incredible. If you have a vision, you can execute that vision. You can make it real. And so I do pieces occasionally like that, where it's just like, I see it this way, I want it to be just like that, and you go in and do it. But and then there are ones where it's literally like, wow, I really didn't have much to do with this other than, doing a bunch of iterations and picking the one I liked the best. And so I think the combination is where I find the most magical place. I love to be able to both discover and execute the work that a vision.
Right.
It's so weird though how much computer graphics and so many of these algorithmic things just resembled the visions I was having in my head long before I knew about computer graphics. I think there's something inherently, it's math. It's these things. It's the same way the brain works. So I think we are, a lot of the visions as kind of mandalas and phosphenes and various types of geometric patterns and whatnot are really fundamental algorithms.
Right. So you're being inspired by them because of nature, and then that's the beginning, the genesis of a piece, and then you see it again, and then you get to play with it a bit. And
yeah, exactly. You look at a piece of cauliflower. I mean, there's even another one. It's kind of a weird, I forget what it's called, but it's so fractal. You'd swear it's a mandible.
The Romanesco,
yes,
the green one, the fractal.
Yeah.
Let's call it fractal cauliflower.
Yeah. It's just so that's really cool. Can't be. That's just a straight up fractal, man.
Yeah, it is. I always struggle to eat them. I don't want to. It's too beautiful.
I know.
Well, very cool. So now you're kind of in the last number of years anyway, been working more and more in real time.
Mm-hmm.
How has that affected the way that you kind of explore the creation of the work, as well as being able to, I guess, explore it once you've made it? Has it also influenced the process of making it itself?
Absolutely. I think any medium kind of it's important to allow it to influence the work and to try to design work that's appropriate for that medium. I know with 3D printing, my sculptures that I made for 3D printing they were design problems. How can I, maximize the potential of this medium, and use the least material possible so it's inexpensive to produce, all kinds of things.
It has to be able to stand up as well.
Yeah, it's got to be able to stand up. It's got to be watertight, all those things. I think with real time, the biggest thing for me was just was so much about compromise in terms of poly counts and just the resolution of things, the amount of complexity I could have on screen at any one moment. And as a consequence, it's been great because, man, I have learned more about optimizing topology than I had no interest in that before at all. And it's like now it's kind of like I'm kind of into it. I like it. It's like, man, look at that. That's only 25,000 polygons. It looks like millions of polygons. You'd never know. And so
it's kind of satisfying to be able to do
that. It is. And especially with the tools in Houdini, it's just so effective to be able to make anything you can imagine, and then to be able to, in short order, just, turn that into a VDB and, short up, get everything just right, and then, put it back into polygons, super high res, all the detail built into a single watertight mesh of triangles, and then just, down res it and poly reduce it. And it's like with all I got very good at using the poly reduce tools and being able to get it down, and you get to where you kind of know, like, I'm going to need 50,000 polygons for that one. And this will be good. I can do that in about 5,000 polys. And so, I think that's been the biggest thing for me, is that, which I kind of, was loath to take on initially, but once I saw what I saw through a headset on one of the modern ones, it was like, okay, it's okay. I had one moment, I think in about 2013, something like that, where I saw in a prototype Oculus, some people are working with, they were doing kind of a screensaver video game thing. And I'd struggled trying to work with them, art directing and making stuff for them, because it was just, they wanted it to run on desktops without fancy graphics cards, and really super low poly, really low res maps. And it just, no matter what we did, it just looked so crude. It just was heartbreaking for me. And they got one of the very early prototypes of the Rift, and uh, and then, yeah, I tried this out, and as I put it on, and I saw the thing, and suddenly it was like, oh wow, in VR, that's way less important. It's like, yeah, that's just 4 polygons and it's flat shaded, but it's there, right? It's right here. I can touch it. It's real. And so it kind of it did something. And I kind of went, okay, well, for VR, maybe I can anyway. And then of course with the high-end graphics cards, like you can do so much more. So
Yeah, now that's becoming less of an issue.
it is.
Poly count, and we're being able to explore some of those more high res scenarios now. I'm sure you're excited to explore and experiment
Yes.
that without
Well, and
limitation.
I've jumped through so many hoops, like with Anandala, my latest VR world. I've got all these creatures, and they're pretty high res, and so I can only really afford to have, and the world itself is super high res, so I can only afford to have, 3, 4, maybe if they're simpler, a dozen of these things on screen at once. But I have hundreds of them, and so they're kind of allocated to zones and whatnot, and you can only see a few of them at a time, which is fine. But it's a lot of a lot of work and trickery to go in and figure all that out and build systems so that they're only here, or if you go over here, they go away. And turning things on and off is a lot of coding
Right.
that is really just a technical limitation. It'd just be nice to be able to just like, okay, I'm just making stuff, and okay, now go in it, and you don't have to worry. It's just the world is there, like the real world. It's just there all the time. Although there's no actual evidence that if you're not seeing something, it still exists.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to prove again.
Mm-hmm. When I look out my window and I see, the mountains or whatever, I have no way to know if that's not just on a card.
Right. Yeah. Well, then maybe you could call the people in the mountains and ask them. But
Yeah.
then still, that's just their perspective.
I'm pretty sure most of these people walking around out there are NPCs.
So, with the creatures that you make, do you name them, and you have like a kind of almost a relationship with them? I'm guessing
Yeah.
you start to see characteristics in them that kind of speak to you in some way.
Yeah, they are creatures. They're really, I was trying to, rather than making NPCs or sort of game AI, I was more interested in kind of the I don't know, the philosophical aspect of it. Like, well, what if it was really alive? And the other element of it is, for years, I was into AI and artificial life and what I could do with it. And, the go-to scenario for that is survival of the fittest and, predator-prey relationships and, eating and like, this whole biosphere, this whole ecosystem, selection pressure from the environment and so on. And I just couldn't help over the years reading other people's critiques of artificial life and the dystopian scenarios and whatnot. Thinking I just don't want to be party to something to creating something that suffers, or I just don't want to be like some laboratory where I'm creating things and then killing them, and it has this kind of dark thing to it that I didn't want to be. And I just kept thinking about it for years. And I came across, when I was starting to make the creatures for Anandala, which initially were just going to be like NPCs. They were going to have some cool animation things on them and be automated, but appear to be alive. But I was trying to think, well, couldn't I make them a little more than that? Couldn't they be a little bit alive? So I was reading these papers on uh, behavior in terms of cognitive neuroscience, and they basically they break down the motivations for behavior in life into two categories: the intrinsic and the extrinsic. And the extrinsic motivations are when you do something with a goal in mind. You're gonna build a house to get out of the rain, or you're gonna hunt and gather so you got something to eat, or you're gonna work this dead end job to pay the rent. Whatever it is, we're often very goal oriented, and those are the extrinsically motivated things where you do some behavior in order to enable some other reward or whatever. Whereas with intrinsic behaviors, they are their own reward. They are done for their own sake and without some other goal in mind. And I just thought it was so interesting the way they describe the examples of intrinsically motivated behaviors, which are play, creativity, art, music, dance, all these things, social interaction, scientific inquiry and discovery. And it was just across the board, it was like, curiosity, search for novelty, all these things. It's like, that's all I'm interested in. Those are the noble qualities of life. All the other ones are just savagery. I'm going to make life that only has these intrinsically motivated behaviors. And so that's what I did. And they are, they're self-determined. Their behavior is all self-determined. They are aware of themselves. They're self-aware. They're aware of others. And they're able to interact and respond, and their behavior is all emergent. Like none of it's pre-programmed or predetermined. That said, they're very simple. They don't have a whole lot they can do, but they're very expressive and they're very creative. And so they have their own language. It's a real kind of a language and an emotive language. And then they communicate through moving they're changing their shapes and their bodies, kind of like an octopus can change its texture and its form and undulate, and also they're chromatophores, so they can change the colors and textures on their surfaces. And they're that you can talk with them, and they know when you're talking, and they can respond, and they're polite. They won't interrupt you. Anyway. I mean, sometimes they might. They might. I don't have complete control. They're engineered, so they have a certain range of possibilities. But because there's enough parameters and there's enough range to them, and then because so much of that is determined randomly how those things interact, there's no way to really predict. And even after a few years now of hanging out with them and stuff, they still surprise me. They still occasionally will do something like, wow, I never would have thought that I'd see that happen.
That's amazing. Is there anything with them that you, with working with them, particularly moving into real time, that you haven't explored with them yet that you would like to? Maybe more interactivity or anything visually, or anything that you kind of you're keen to explore next?
Yeah, I think it would be fun to maybe focus on making them a little more complex in their behavior and in their ability to maybe analyze the person they're talking with, be able to maybe give them access to some kind of bio data, be able to know their pulse or their read their eye movements to know what they're thinking a little bit, or just anticipate their emotional response. Also to maybe incorporate the user's voice so that they could kind of do voice analysis and maybe develop some understanding there. But what I found is in every other ambition that I come up with, or at least a lot of them, I find, okay, well, that would be interesting, but you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. In other words, when you're interacting with them, it's like what they already do all this stuff, and like that wouldn't add that much. That wouldn't add much that you'd know the difference. Or it becomes a slippery slope into, well, now you're introducing, competition, conflict, survival. Even forms of learning can be kind of risky because you can learn things badly. And so you have to be careful with that. Some of the early experiments, it's so apparent in humans. Like, this is why there's so much, and in animals there's so much dysfunction, because there's great complex brains and learning machines, and it's hard unlearning things. And so if you find a pattern, in neural networks, they call it getting trapped in local minima. If you consider the ball rolling down a fitness landscape and it gets caught in a little valley, it thinks, well, this is the best solution to the problem. But no, it's not a very good one. It's just settled in a valley. So, yeah, but
so the intrinsics is more appealing to you because it's not dealing with competing against something or taking too much input from the outside. It's just expressing its joy. And
yeah, and in a sense, it's a little bit of a reflection. It's like it's such a philosophical idea that wow, to ascend beyond savagery is going to require the loss of a lot of stuff. We're going to have to unlearn a lot of things, and ultimately become a lot simpler in a way. I don't know. I think there are certainly other paths, but that's kind of what I've been finding with the creatures, is that they're in a sense, their simplicity is what makes them so powerful. They're really great. They're very therapeutic. They're very healing. They're kind, and very unthreatening. And even though they might be physically kind of seem threatening, but when you get in there with them and hang out for a minute, like pretty soon you've hung out with a few, now it's like they're just not threatening. And you look at the pictures or a video and you might go, wow, that's kind of spooky. It looks, kind of Lovecraftian or something, these kind of monstrous abstract sculptures that are wiggling around. But yeah.
Well, definitely my experience of experiencing your work in VR, and being able to kind of hover around and find moments in it was definitely one of wonder and curiosity, and something that I hadn't seen before was making me think in some different ways. And really, I wanted to be there longer than I expected.
Yeah.
Actually really enjoyed being there for quite some time.
Oh, thank you. That's cool. That's good to hear. Yeah, I'd love for you to meet the Blorts in Anandala and get to know some of them. They're pretty fun and entertaining.
Definitely, yeah, that sounds great. Well, where would I mean, I'm certainly interested in that. Of course, where would anybody be able to find examples of your work?
Well, Anandala is going to be, it's an official selection of the Venice International Film Festival, the Venice Biennale. And so it's going to be, thank you, and it's going to be in 14 venues around the world from the September 1st to the 19th. And then it will also be available on Viveport during that time for folks that are, I think, signed up for the film festival. But I think it also will be available for anyone who has a Vive Infinity subscription or something. But that's kind of what's going on now. And beyond that, I haven't really figured it out. I was kind of holding out, hoping the museums would open up again and I could get it into some museum exhibits. And I'm still hopeful. We'll see what happens. But I just found it's because it's it might seem to some people at a glance to be a video game, and it's not. And so I don't have great hopes for it on Steam. My previous piece, Vortasia, I was on Steam, and for a weird abstract art piece, I think it did pretty well. But the gamers, a lot of them just kind of just tore it to pieces because it's not a game, and they wanted a game. So
Right.
it's just not the market for virtual reality art. The hardcore gamer audience, but hopefully that will change at some point in the future, and we'll find a way to make it more accessible to people. There's all these other venues. It's like I'm always torn. It's like, well, do I, you know, maybe do I really dig in and try to make my way, infiltrate the wealthy fine art world and sell it to some billionaire, and then nobody ever sees it except this rich guy? Or do I just, forget about it and just find a way to get it to the most people? But even there's not that many people with headsets yet. So until we
Yeah.
solve that conundrum, folks will just have to come over, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think that no, the games has definitely been the domain of gamers for a long time, but now that this technology is being used for other things such as filmmaking and art for its own sake as well. Maybe those platforms will start to have their own area where you can go expecting to experience that kind of stuff, with the
Yeah.
right expectation.
Yeah. I think the museums seem to be on it. And if they can just get to a place where they can open up safely, and having VR headsets introduces a whole other challenge with the uh, contamination and all of that. But also, just from a standpoint of throughput, it's not a very good. It's not like a theater where you can
Yeah.
move 500 people in there, and then another 500 an hour later. You got one person per headset for however long they're in there. So it's
Yeah.
not a very very efficient thing. And the best thing is just like, let's just get everybody a headset and a real fast computer. Just ship one out to everybody in the world, and I send the bill to, I don't know, those rich guys.
Absolutely. I'm definitely up for that. Well, yeah, and maybe there's other. Have you explored other formats like domes and that kind of thing where you can have immersive with more people? I guess it's a different thing.
It is. It's a very different thing. It's just not the same thing. They're cool, and I'm kind of excited because I think one of my biggest problems with domes has been the bleed and the bounce. It just kind of
Mm.
gets kind of milky looking, and I just kind of, I'm a fidelity snob.
Yeah,
So
well earned. Yeah,
and to be fair, I would love to do domes, and have wanted to do them, since college. I was trying to do dome things, and I've just never been able to make that happen. But now I'm reading about these domes, these LED domes that don't
yeah,
have the light spill problem and stuff, and that's pretty exciting. And I was
yeah.
talking to my buddy Eric Hansen, who
Oh, I know. Yeah,
has done some wonderful
Blue Planet.
dome work. And he was saying he saw one of these LED domes, and he said it was kind of remarkable. You kind of don't miss the 3D. There's something about it that's it's not VR by any means, but it's really cool still,
Right.
and certainly immersive. So I think that'd
I
be
kind
really cool.
I kind of felt the same way with ultra high resolution TV when I first saw that. It was like it almost felt 3D just because the
Yeah.
pixels have gone away.
Oh my God, the HDR on the TVs now, that changed everything. I couldn't believe it. I thought it was kind of a gimmick or something, because I'd seen real HDR at SIGGRAPH like 15 years ago or something, where they had
Yeah,
a whole room behind a little screen to produce enough light to create the high dynamic range. They're just like massive air conditioners and bright sun level bright lights, but it was like looking out a window. And now it's like, wow, yeah, it's on my flat panel. It's pretty good. It's not quite as, quite a high range as it was there at SIGGRAPH back when,
Yeah.
but it's a phenomenal leap, I think, in television technology.
And also headsets are getting much cheaper and more accessible. And
Yeah, it's so frustrating because clearly the Oculus Quest seems to be the way it's all going. That's the
right,
one that's selling, everybody's buying, and it's the greatest thing in the world because it's affordable. You don't need a computer and there's no wires and it's easy to use. And God, how can you argue with it? But but it is just such a fraction of what you can do on a tethered headset on a real computer. And
yeah,
so it's yet again that like, oh, I've got to dumb it all down again, water it all down and make it. And I've always had this kind of thing. As I said, I'm kind of a fidelity snob, and partly just because my work is so much about complexity. But I've always had this analogy, which was like when I was doing stuff for low res, real time things early on, it was like, if you take, this is one of the reasons I just didn't like it, was you could take the greatest artists in the world and say, make a painting of a fish and or a model of a fish, whatever, make a fish. And they'll make you the most beautiful, nuanced, gorgeous image of a fish. And then you take a mediocre junior high school student and go, make a fish. And they make a fish and it's crude and kind of not very good. It's very mediocre. And now you go, okay, now down-res them both to, cheesy video game resolution. They're the same. It basically it takes everything and makes it look kind of just low res. It's like the low
right.
res can't carry the more sophisticated, nuanced information, and so everything winds up looking kind of like it was made by one kind of mediocre artist, and that's an extreme characterization that's not always true by any means. I marvel and envy the people who are able to really master the low poly style and somehow make great art in spite of only using a handful of polygons. I don't, for me, I don't know how they do it. I can't seem to do it very well. So I need lots of polygons, but
Well,
it
as you
has
said,
been done well.
your work has a lot of complexity in it, and that's sometimes there's some certain parts of that highly complex systems that
Yeah.
you can't down res. You can
Yeah. And it
make
does it.
things and you can low poly things, but certainly
Yes.
with complexity, with geometric complexity, you
Yeah,
can't.
it's the low poly thing seems to homogenize things a lot. It's just like, yeah, everything kind of has this look. Um, and that goes along with the whole thing of wanting to have this individual, unique looking thing. Like you said, I felt great that when you said it earlier. You said like you saw my stuff at SIGGRAPH. I was like, wow, I've never seen anything like that before. And that for me is like that's the greatest thing because that novelty is one of the key triggers for awe. And so that, wow, I've never seen anything like that. It does something in your brain where you're forced into a state of presence where you're really focused on right now in this moment. And that's a wonderful place to be.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a tricky old world out there, and being able to give people moments of that, it is medicine, really. Being able to
Mm-hmm.
achieve that calm state of awe and inspiration is a gift.
Even when it's just for a moment, it really there's something good about it. I think it helps people. And like I mentioned, that accommodation thing that comes with awe. I have a theory. There's no studies backing this or anything, but it's just my own theory, or at least a hypothesis that um, when you go through that process of accommodation where you have to sort of incorporate some new information into your model of reality and your model of yourself, that it can be more powerful than just the new information, because I think a lot of people have many things in their lives where they kind of, it's occurred to them, man, I should be nicer to my brother, or I shouldn't be so, critical of my cousin, or whatever it is. Like, it's like I should be, better. I should be a better person. And they have specific things where it's like, God, I should quit drinking, or, whatever it is. These things where people know they need to do something, but they can't quite do it. And so a moment of awe, I think, where you have this process of accommodation is going to happen, whether you like it or not. I think it's going to pull in some of that stuff. It's like you go to the Grand Canyon and suddenly you're like, shit, I need to be nicer to my brother. I'm going to do it. Like whatever it is, I think it pulls in a lot of that accumulated stuff, or that sort of goals for improvement. Anyway, that's my theory.
A theory I buy fully, and I've always felt that way about nature. Certainly, I think it's the master at that, just being able to make you feel that way in grand and simple things, like just a tree on its own is enough to make you feel that. Or the Grand Canyon, which is grand, literally.
Yeah, it's so funny. My wife and I we're both artists, and we'll go to amazing places and with people or family and wherever, and then we go through our vacation photos, and it's like, here's a bunch of little rocks on the ground, and here's a rusty side of a building. Here's the peeling paint on a sign. Here's a weird looking stain on the asphalt. Like we're just so much more about the textures and the beauty in nature, or you like, here's 600 pictures of the sky. What did you take any pictures of your kids? There's it. We got this one. This one was, we went to dinner one night. I got this one. Yeah, terrible.
I feel the same way. I always look through my camera roll and do the same thing. Bits of tree bark and none of the kids.
Yeah.
Maybe bits of the kids. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's. I think that's the thing. Being an artist and being curious, you're always seeing that all the time, and
right.
Being
novelty.
Inspired by it.
It's the novelty gets us.
Yeah, and it's amazing how it's always there. You don't have to do anything particularly complicated to go and experience it.
I used to have when we would go, a lot of times working in visual effects as a supervisor, you're going on scouts and you go into things, and it's just a lot of standing around and waiting around and driving around. And I have a really low tolerance for boredom, but I also view it as unnecessary. And so I would always have these little solutions if we had to go somewhere and we're waiting and it's boring. I always carried a little pocket microscope, and it's just a little like 10 power or something, but sometimes we'd be waiting around and they'd come to get me or whatever, and they'd find me looking at a wall, like with a magnifying thing through a microscope, or down on the floor looking at the carpet, like, God, look at that. It looks like a jungle.
It's there. Yeah, it's there.
Kept me inspired, kept me coming back. If I just, sat there, I don't think I could have handled it. I'd have freaked out and started yelling at people or something. What are you doing? Why are we here? Come on. We going to talk about this or not?
Well, that definitely doesn't sound like you, so the other solution makes much more sense. Speaking of VR again, we had a question come in. Whether you have any other experiences that you've seen that you've enjoyed recently, any kind of cool VR stuff that you've noticed along the way, other than your own, obviously.
Nope, mine. That's it. It's the only thing out there.
It's the only one.
It's the only one. Well, it's actually hard because I'm not I'm not big on games. I just
Yeah.
I don't know. I respect it. My kids are big gamers. I like watching them, enjoy it and stuff. And I've done it. I've played some games. I kind of enjoy the driving. Like I just like driving around in a thing. If there's goals, as soon as there's goals and puzzles to solve, I kind of lose interest. It just feels like work. It's like I feel like I should be paid for this. This is just work. But I think I'm odd in that way. So it's hard because almost everything out there is games.
Yeah.
And the 360 video stuff, the more narrative things, I just kind of not that interested in that either. With the art stuff, I've seen a few things. There's most of the stuff was a while back because it's we don't get to go to these VR expos anymore, but
Right.
we meet people and see their work. But the Museum of Other Realities is on Steam, and they have events in there. They've hosted cans and all these VR festivals and shows and whatnot, and they have a sizable kind of permanent collection exhibit of VR art. A lot of cool tilt brush scenes and stuff, but also really kind of fancier Unity developed things. I have a big space in there, a big installation called Devalaya Rupanam, which I'm very proud of, and I think it's a real cool place to go and visit. It's a popular destination for their visitors. And so I really recommend that. It's so cool because it's social VR. You can go there, you can meet people there. And they do have events periodically where you can go and meet new people. But if you have friends, you can go there and hang out in VR without having to leave your VR station. So I love that. And also because I got a Valve Index early on, they gave me Half-Life Alyx, which I was just curious, wanted to see, well, what could they come up with, And it's really amazing. It is so cool to see what a AAA thing done for VR can be, and it's a stunning achievement. I think it was just amazing. I haven't played the whole thing. I played for a couple of hours, and occasionally I'll get go like, I want to go in there and check that out again, play a little further along. But I tend to get stuck at a puzzle and just like, I don't want to have to work for anybody. But I love the thing that you got a glove you can grab things with, and I am loath to admit, because I'm so anti-violence and conflict and everything, but shooting things in VR is just a blast. Shooting monsters and stuff, and that's one of the reasons I think another reason I maybe stay away from it. I have this kind of one-track mind, kind of an immersive personality. I don't know what you call it, but when I get in there, I'm kind of all in, like I'm there. It's like I kind of forget that I'm playing a game, or that it's like not real or something. And so, my wife and my daughter thought it was hysterical that I'm in there like, oh, great, another one of these fucking guys. And just like, so like, who are you? Like, that is no, it kind of scared me. So, yeah, but oh boy, it's beautiful. It's just stunning.
I felt very similar with games, and I think I left it at Quake 2. That was when I stopped playing, and it was a night where I had to sit there and complete the game. And I think I was up till 6 in the morning. I just didn't know that much time had passed, and I was so into it. I didn't give up games because I didn't like them. I think I kind of gave them up because I couldn't control the amount of use of them.
That might be my thing too, because I remember I got into computers very early before people really had them at home very much. was kind of an oddity to have one. And I remember with the Amiga, there was a game, it was very popular called, it's kind of famous, Another World, I think it was called. And I got really into that. And I think I might have gone without sleep for a couple of days and nights trying to get through that. And, it kind of freaked out my family and it freaked me out. And after that, I kind of went, yeah. And then afterwards, when I beat, I was like, I won. I did it. I played through. I did it. And then it was kind of like, and what do I have to show for it? I need sleep. I can't, I'm useless. I'm just like, my health is suffering. I haven't eaten or slept. And it kind of put me off to the whole thing.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I think it's incredible to me that it's kind of come full circle. Now, I wanted an Amiga when I was a kid. We ended up with an Amstrad PC, which wasn't capable as much as the Amiga of doing graphics. And I had to kind of but it still could. I could still move pixels around in a very crude way. That kind of gave me that spark originally. But it's amazing where it's come to today. I think that there's so much power available to an individual now to be able to create and express the things that, like you mentioned in the beginning of my career, or at least when I was at university and it was all SGI machines, you couldn't play with Maya unless you had 20 grand for a license and then 100 grand for a machine, and
that's right.
Nobody could do it. But now, kind of anyone can do it.
Yeah. Also, when I was learning computer graphics, there was no documentation for anything. There were no courses. There were no tutorials. There was no internet. And even like books were obscure, and there were no books. They were always out of date. Like you couldn't get a book on computer graphics in the early days of computer graphics. The only way you learned it back then was through what they called the priesthood, which were people who were in it and had gone to school for computer science and had written the software and everything. So it was a hard thing to learn back then, and you just had to bang your head against it and try things and experiment and read whatever cryptic documentation there was for the software. I made some good friends and also made their lives rather busy who worked in tech support in the early days of the Amiga. I met one of my best friends because I wound up calling there all the time to get tech support on the Amiga or whatever. And it was just the weirdest thing because he became tech support at Side Effects. And it was the same guy, and I couldn't figure it out. It's like I'd finally moved on. I was like working on an SGI, working on Prisms, which became Houdini. And I'm called up and it's like, wait a minute, what's going on? I know your voice. You're the Amiga guy. It's just, do you answer all the tech calls for all the computers and software? Anyway,
yeah. Yeah, it's
so many resources now. Like, God, just like your thing and like anything you want to just Google it. Oh, here's how you do this. Here's how you do that. Here's a really great, tutorial on that thing. And so, yeah, amazing. And the tools are just unbelievable. I've been playing with Substance Painter and Substance recently. And, I've tried to mostly steer clear of anything using a UV workflow because I have, weird tricks for avoiding it. And my stuff is weird. So it doesn't, it's not necessary mostly. But for a whole series I just finished of ancient artifacts from the distant future, I kind of needed, realistic texturing and stuff. So I had to make real UVs and go in and make maps and stuff. And it was just phenomenal. I couldn't believe it. Man, that stuff, I was a texture painter back in the early 90s, and it was a little different thing back then.
Right. Yeah. People take it for granted, the fact that you don't have to abstract into 2D, paint things, and then see what it looks like. Oh, no, that's not what I meant. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so nice being able to be interactive with it.
Well, also it had all the procedural tools, just being able to have a lot of that stuff, the dirt, the aging, the, putting things in the cracks and the concavities and the ridges of wearing, edge wear and all that stuff being so simple, where we had to just hand paint all that, like,
Right.
and yeah.
And now also the bits of machine learning starting to come into play and be able to enhance the workflow with that as well, and fill in details that you wouldn't maybe even have time for or
Right.
the ability for. Yeah,
Yeah.
that seems to be creeping into a lot of tools these days.
We're well on our way to being heads in jars, just watching our brains entertain us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being here today and joining us. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for taking us on a magical ride through your career and your artistic self and your process and what inspires you and how you think is absolutely fascinating. And I really appreciate it.